Hi guys. Some of you might remember that on a previous video not long ago the head flew off my hammer. Basically it was rotted. The shaft, well this is it, snapped completely. Basically it's rotted over the years. It's been on a long while, but the heat generated from the forging shrinks the wood in the head because the head gets very hot and consequently the heads tend to come off. So to stop that I tend to just drop it in water, leave them soaking, and over time this rots them. But anyway, I suppose I ought to put it in oil or something or other, but I don't. So I'm going to show you how to reshaft a hammer. Might sound a simple thing, but quite a few people struggle. So what we got? We've got the hammerhead, which I've given a bit of a clean up because that was red rusty where it'd been in the water for ages. Never sort of out of it for very long, so I thought while it's off I'll clean it up. So that's that. New shaft, which I've already cut down to size because it was a little bit long, and I've also shaved it down thickness wise. Excuse me, you can't really see it, but I wanted it to fit my hand nicely. The original one was much too fat, or this was too fat before thinning it down. And you might say, well, buy a thinner one to fit your hand, but the trouble is this end is usually too small for the hammerhead. So that's the critical size. When you go to choose your hammer handle, you want to either take the head with you or take some good measurements, because you could end up with a handle that fits your hand but doesn't fit the head. Anyway, so this one's pretty close to the right size. I don't know if we'd be able to see it very well here. Difficult for me to see what I'm doing in the camera and do it, but it's almost the right thickness that way and almost the right size that way as well. I don't know if you can get an idea. It's pretty damn close, so it's not going to take an awful lot, I don't think, to get a little bit off the edges all the way around and just get that to fit. So I'm going to do that with an old rasp. You might be wondering what this is. This is a bit of hardwood. It's a bit of oak actually that I've used for various things. You can see I've cut a wedge out of it before, and that's exactly what it is for, to cut a wedge to put in the end before the metal wedges go in. The wooden expands it one way and then the metal expands it the other. So we'll get it over in the vise, see if we can get this to fit. Right, to stop doing any damage to the wood, I've got a whole bit, this is a bit of lead, I've got loads of it kicking about, which I use for melting into the bases of candlesticks and various things to give them a bit of weight. So I'm just going to wrap a bit of that around it so that I can hold it in the vise a little bit tighter than I probably normally would just on the bare wood, and that just holds it nice and firm. An old rasp, hundreds of uses these old rasps. Excuse me. And just take a little bit off each side. It's so little that really needs to come off. There's no point really doing it with a power tool. You'll end up taking too much off, which is never a good thing. Let's see if that's anywhere near. Must try and remember which way around the head goes on. And that's not quite near, it just wants a little bit more off, I think. Now these rasps have been used and used and used for my shoeing, and as you can see they're still perfectly alright for doing a bit of woodwork. This is the smooth side and it's tearing it off a treat. Check the right way around, and that's just slipping on, but it's a little bit too wide I think now. See, it's just going on, and you can just see, I don't know, well if you can, it's catching on the corners there. So I'm just going to whip those off a little bit. Seems to be catching on the sort of opposite corners at the moment. That's better. Starting to slip on. Just going to see if I can knock that on a little bit. And what it does, it sort of marks where it's tight. Just use the end that I've cut off. You don't want to tap it on too much, but just enough so you can, it sort of marks where it's come tight, and you can take a bit more off. So you can see where it's, if it can focus, see where it's caught up. You get a sort of a smooth line. You can just see it, make out the line where it goes. And you use that as your guide for taking more off. You want to be careful up here because it is sloped, so you want to keep your slope. You don't want a sort of a line in it, because that will give you a weak spot. So you've got to go with the shape, which you can do even with a flat file if you use sort of the edge of it to go up the slopes. Obviously you could use a round file or a half round, but I've got millions of these flat files. Right, that's gone on, but it's still, what, 1.25 inches to go. So it's only just on, so we'll give it another little tap on. See where it's catching up now. Just whip it off again. Now, you might notice when you look in these that they're slightly tapered. Now, I don't know if it's by design or whether it's just part of the process, but you'll find that sometimes they'll be really tight one end, and then by the time you've got your shaft right the way through to this end, it's actually quite loose. So I'm not sure if that is part of the design so that you can open it up at that end and it stops it coming off, or whether it's just part of the way things are made. You can see there's still a bit more to come off there. You know, whether when they put the hole in it, the punch they use is tapered and they don't put a straight one through. I don't know, but anyway, so don't be surprised that you get your hammer tight, or fitting tight, your shaft fitting tight, and then by the time it's come through, it actually looks rather loose. That's quite common, which is one of the reasons you want to get it a tight fit to start with, because you've got to expand that bit of wood back out at the other end, which is what stops it coming off, obviously. Now that, I reckon, we must be getting pretty close there. So I think what I'm going to do is perhaps put the... No, maybe not. What I did, I just tried to hammer it on a little bit more, and it's a little bit too tight. So we'll just take a little bit more off. It's one of those things, it's sort of slow and steady. You don't want to take too much off in one go, otherwise you'll end up spoiling it. So it's easier just to do a little bit at a time. Try and keep it sort of parallel, running back towards the slope of the shaft. Otherwise you will end up with a very narrow point one end. So you'll end up with it sort of pointy rather than the same width all the way along. Now that looks a little bit better. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to sand it off, make it a little bit smoother. Now these are just a couple of sticky discs that were for a disc sander. It was sort of an upright bench disc sander, which I don't have, but the discs came free. So I've just taken the backing off both of them and stuck them together, and they make quite nice sanding discs. It just, the two together stiffens it up a bit. Then you can sand all sorts. I did the shaft with it after I'd taken the worst off. Just gives a much better finish. It's better. So what we've got to do next is, you can see that sanded that off, put a split down the middle for the wooden wedge. Now you want to do this before you, obviously before you put it onto the hammerhead. You could try and get it on and then take it off again, but once it's right on, it's a bugger to get off. So when you think you've got it about right, put the slot in it. Let's move the camera up a bit and see what we're up to. And I'm just going to use hacksaw blade. What I'm going to do, I'm going to put 2 hacksaw blades on there so that you get a much thicker slot, I suppose you'd call it. A thicker, yeah, thicker slot. I'm just going to mark it with a single one, so I know where I'm going to put it, and then I'm going to stick another one on there. Alright, so I don't know if you can see this, if it will focus because it's very dark in here. See, there's 2 on there. And I'm just going to run them down it. Sorry about the quality of the video. A, it's very dark in here. It's a right miserable day. And B, which I didn't realise at the time, was that the camera is misting up. The lens has got cold, and consequently it's gone a bit misty. So you want to go down about just over an inch, I suppose, maybe a little bit more, about 1.25 inches perhaps. That'll give you a nice bit for your, I don't know if you can see there, if it will focus again. It probably won't because it's so blooming dark in here, but you get the idea. It's about the width of 2 hacksaw blades, and that'll give you a nice slot for your wedge to go in. Right, so get my lead off. And I haven't gone right the way down with the double blade. I forgot to say that actually. I've gone about halfway down with the 2 blades and then the rest of the way down with the single blade. So you have got a bit of a taper. Now this is actually a bit tight, so I didn't quite judge it right. In cases like this, it's probably advisable to leave the extra bit on the end of the handle and then cut it off afterwards, because it can damage it when you put it on like this. So it's just about come through to where I want it. Give it some. Yeah, so it's just come through flush. But as you can see, there is still a bit of room around the edge there. So we're going to cut off a wedge. You want to go down the grain, not across it, otherwise it would just fall apart. So we're going to cut a little wedge out of that. Let's just move the camera around again. Let's see what we're up to amongst all the chaos and rubbish in this place. Right, going to start about 3/16 of an inch at the top, tapering it down, and you want it about the sort of depth that you had the slot, which was about 1.25 inches, I suppose. Obviously it doesn't matter if it's not, but get it as close as you can. See if that'll focus. Yep, just about. You see I've got a nice little wedge there, full width. Well, it's broken, so I'm just going to tear it off to the width I need for that head. You can see it's fallen into 3 pieces, but this one's about the right width. You can see that it's quite an opening around the edge there, so you can see how tapered that hole in that head is. Find another hammer. We're just going to tap it in. You can see that's going in quite nicely. You can see although that's gone right in flush, a treat, but that's still that gap around the edge, which I'm not horrendously happy with, but there you go. You can just, as I say, it just shows you how tapered these heads are. So now the next thing, we'll stick in the metal wedges to expand it the other way. I suppose the only other thing you could have done was made a thicker, of course I can't see very well there, I'll just move the camera up again, made a thicker wooden wedge. But of course you don't know really how much you're going to need excuse me, until you start putting it all together. But trust me, by the time you've got these in and the other bit, it's not going to come off. I'm going to put it about 1/3 of the way up and turn around and put the other one again about 1/3 of the way the other side, or the other way. And that's got them all in a treat. All nice and flush. I'm just going to run the sander over that just to smooth it all off, make it look a little bit nicer. That's assuming I can find the sander. It's down here somewhere. There we go. Cable's only just long enough. Right, just going to take that top off so everything's nice and flush. Alright, see if that'll focus. There you go. So that's split the wedges every which way now, so it's opened it up sideways and the other way, but there's still a tiny little gap there, which I'm not all that happy about. So I might just put a drop of epoxy over that. I don't know, yeah. I might just finish it off, just to tidy it up. If I was using this, just doing this for myself every day, that would be as far as I go, I wouldn't bother, but since I'm doing a video, I might just tart it up a bit. Right, so I've been away for 5 minutes. I've put a bit of epoxy over the end. I've got my gloves on because I've been waxing it as well. So just put a little bit of epoxy over the top, filled right in the gaps. I didn't bother to sand it right the way back to bare metal or to the wood. And I've waxed the handle, just put a bit of clear furniture wax over the top. Just finishes it off nicely, makes it look a bit better. And if you are particularly sort of house proud about your workshop, nice to have some nice looking tools about, and that just tidies it up a little bit. So there you go, one reshafted hammer. Thanks for watching, catch you on the next one.